Our last section in this chapter on project framework or foundational concepts involves life cycles. And we want to talk about three different life cycles and distinguish between them. The project life cycle, so the amount of time it's going to take to get this project done. And typically, if we're talking about the project life cycle, we're talking about the phases that we're going to divide this project into. Then we have a product life cycle. So the entire life of the product from cradle to grave. So this does include the project life cycle within it, the time to create this product. But then what do we do after we create this new product or service? We just don't drop it and walk away. We have to transition this new product or service to operations. And operations can include a number of phases in itself, and we'll go through those. So that's the product life cycle. Our third life cycle we want to talk about is a little more tricky, and it's something that a lot of people get very confused about. It's the project management life cycle. So where the project life cycle concerns phases, this concerns processes. So processes and process groups that occur within phases. So let's start our discussion of these different life cycles. So very early on in planning, we're going to figure out the project life cycle. Maybe this is the very first thing we're going to do in the process, develop a project management life cycle. Figure out how I want to divide this project up into phases. And do I want it to be a waterfall set of phases, a sequential set of phases? Do I want to overlap phases? Am I going to do things iteratively or even go beyond iterative, do something that's really advanced iterative, do agile or adaptive? So I'm going to figure out the different sequence of phases, how many phases there should be, what I'm going to call these phases, and there are no standards for how this should be done. PMI is not going to legislate or define and say there should be a minimum of 3 phases or 5 phases or 10 phases, and they're not going to lay down the law and say what the names of phases should be. That's all up to you. So there are no standards for these phases. At the end of every phase, we've created deliverables. So in our early planning phases, and that's pretty typical in projects, that the first phases are planning phases, what are the deliverables in the planning phases? Plans, documents, blueprints, specifications, a functional specification, a user requirements document. And so in every phase, we do have deliverables. Even in the end phases, we're doing testing. So we have test documents and results of tests, perhaps, for those phases. So here's a chart slide from the PMBOK guide that's showing the relationship of the project life cycle and phases to processes and process groups. So we define the project life cycle. We break the project up into phases, and here we're kind of categorizing 4 types of phases. Phases to kick off the project, to initiate the project, to get things started and get it authorized. And then we have phases for perhaps doing planning, for getting things all organized, planned, and set up. We have phases for actually carrying out the work, or executing phases for creating our widgets. And we also then have phases for shutting everything down, closing everything down, doing the final testing and the integrated testing and such. So we've got this relationship. So this is pretty waterfall here almost. This is traditional. Do all of your planning first, then execute against your plans, then do all the final testing and get all the final acceptance done and close out the project. Also on the slide, they're showing these diamonds that as we move from phase to phase to phase, we should be going through some decision points. So these diamonds are a phase gate. Some people call them a kill point. So really 2 decisions should be made as we move from phase to phase to phase. So one decision is, did we complete all the work in the preceding phase? If not, go back and finish that work. And then the second decision, perhaps a more interesting decision, is the kill point. So as you move from phase to phase to phase, you should be asking, does the business case still exist? Should we proceed? Are we creating value that maps onto the company's strategic goals? So as we move along, we're learning more and more. We're getting better and better detailed estimates to feed back to senior management. So we're giving them better forecasts of when we're going to finish and how much it's going to cost so they can make informed decisions about should we continue. We're basically collecting the data so they can almost do project selection again in these kill points and phase gates to decide whether we should go forward. So this is critical that we do this. A lot of companies don't do these kill points very well. They allow half-baked ideas to survive, and of course that's a terrible thing. Allowing this half-baked project, if it is such, to survive is going to take away very valuable resources from other projects. So we want to prevent that from happening.